for a specific article, for Article 13. And this is a proposal to allow pocket neighborhoods, which can allow for a more economically sustainable Lyme. Obviously, we've been here before. We've talked about community, we've talked about energy, we've talked about aging, we've talked about the environment. But we think perhaps we haven't sufficiently emphasized the financial reasons that an additional alternative development model could provide for Lyme. Lyme's growth, our model, is unsustainable. It's unsustainable because the average new home in Lyme adds less to the tax base than we have to spend to cover the cost of running our schools in the town. And pocket neighborhoods would help Lyme in two ways. They would help people. They would help people who are downsizing. They would help people who, the new families, because you'd be able to have less expensive homes. And they would also help because they would add more to the tax base. There would be a net gain and not the net deficit that new homes bring now. Okay, what is a pocket neighborhood? It's a type of planned development in which smaller residences are grouped around a courtyard or a common house and garden. They're designed to promote a close-knit sense of community and neighborliness. Pocket homes can be neighborhood homes can be less expensive to build and live in because you share the cost of the underlying land, you share the cost of the infrastructure, there's access to common space, which means homes can be smaller and therefore less costly, and there's also energy savings from things like shared walls. What does the amendment say? It's long. Hi, come on in. You don't want to stand up the whole time? Yes, you do. Okay. The proposal itself is 3 pages long, and there are copies of it, and I think they're out so anybody can read it, and there's also links, but we can summarize it pretty briefly. One of the things I teach at Vermont Law School. I haven't been a practicing lawyer for a long time, but one of the things you teach law students is if you're giving something to a jury, don't give them something to read at the moment that you want to say something really important. And so here we're giving you 3 pages of materials on the ordinance to read. Feel free, come on in. You don't have to stand out there the whole time. So there's no test on the ordinance on these 3 pages, but let us tell you what the important parts of the ordinance are, and then you can take this home and look at it. The big difference is, instead of having a single-family home or a duplex on a lot, we propose that you can have 6 dwellings per lot. The design is flexible, so you can be in 1 or several buildings. The units are smaller. Half of them must be smaller than 1,100 square feet. There's common space for workshops, music, library, etc. But otherwise, we retain all of Lyme's conservation overlay rules and all of Lyme's dimensional controls. Okay, where could pocket neighborhoods be built? Only on Route 10, 1 mile north of Lyme Common. That basically takes you up Route 10 to the playing fields. Okay? And where can they be built? There's a size restriction in the proposed ordinance, so they can't be built just anywhere. They can be built, hi guys, come on in, there's a few seats up here in the front if you want. But lots have to be at least 15 acres in size. And Lyme is interesting. A parcel and a lot are not the same thing. So you can own a piece of property that's a parcel that's 50 acres, and you would think, oh, I've got a lot that's 50 acres. These guys know this well, but just as background. But the lots are actually calculated. So what we're talking about here is only a lot that's 15 acres or larger. So that's what that is. Okay, what's the problem that this amendment will help address? Lyme has become unaffordable for many people. It's unaffordable for people who can't afford to downsize here. I have nice new neighbors on Thetford Hill who used to live in Lyme, and they couldn't find anything, so they're renting the Kearns. But they would really love to live in Lyme. It's for young families, including our own children and grandchildren, who can't afford to buy a house in Lyme. It's for established families who'd like their own parents to live here, like the mom I met at the ski program a couple weeks ago who said, "Oh, I wish this existed. I'm really glad my parents are moving here, but I would rather that I didn't have to build an addition for them in my building. It would be nice if they could live near me but not with me." And last, for people who are having problems paying their property taxes. Also, we're growing older. Lyme is, probably people have seen, New Hampshire's gonna be the oldest state in the United States in about 20 years. I thought, well, is that gonna affect me? But we are definitely gonna be older. And Lyme is getting older faster than New Hampshire. 45, according to the last census, 45%, 44% of the homes in New Hampshire are headed by people who are 55 or older. In Lyme, that figure is 55%. We are getting older. Now, we know that our school attracts families with children. Great school. And the property taxes keep going up. All right? So one reason that our taxes go up is because of the schools. Another is because our zoning plan leads to the creation of large lots. And most people don't buy large lots and then build small homes. And Lyme's experience reflects that. You could guess for a minute, then I'll tell you. But the average appraised value of a newly constructed home in Lyme over the past 3 years, average $454,000. Now, that sounds like a lot of money, but let's see what that does to the tax base. Okay? So our recent new homes, which average 3.7 bedrooms, have a median assessed value of $454,000. So what happens? The type of development, single-family home, assessed value $454,000. There's just one of them, so it adds $454,000 to the tax base. I'm not going to even touch on the issue of current use, assuming, paying no attention to current use, but add $454,000 to the tax base. And at this 2016, that would bring in $11,150 in taxes. Okay. But what happens, so the tax base does increase, but that's just the revenue side. It's not just enough to grow the tax base. We have to look at additional costs, right? All right, so we need another slide. I'm doing such a good job, you're forgetting to turn the slides here, okay. So what are our costs? The town costs are about 1/3 of our budget, and the school costs are about 2/3 of our budget. On town costs, new development, a pocket neighborhood wouldn't add a whole lot because it's on Route 10, so there's not a lot of road costs. And as with all development in town, you have to put in your own septic, your own roads, your own water. So when you look at the cost of building, if you read articles about it nationally, they're looking at what the costs are for all those infrastructure costs. But in this town, the town costs are pretty minimal for our pocket neighborhood proposal. Okay, so what does it come down to? It comes down to kids in schools. How do you figure out how many kids are in a new home? And it's not magic, but so that we've got two sources of statistics that we use. One is the New Hampshire Housing Finance Authority statistics. They tell us that a 4-bedroom home generates a student, and I think, really? Only one? But that's what they say. 3-bedroom homes generate 0.4 students, 2 or fewer generate less than 1 student. And we looked at Lyme statistics. Our new homes average 3.7 bedrooms. Those are the homes that are built in the last 3 years that we were talking about. And the average across town is 0.4 students per home. And in town right now, 73% of Lyme homes don't have anybody under 18 living in them. So we use those figures to try and figure out what our costs would be, what the impact would be. All right. So we saw the slide that showed that recent new homes generate $11,150 in tax revenue. The cost of the expected student, if it were one student, and this is just the student now, is 18,682. Those of you who've been coming to the school budget meetings know that these numbers come from the school budget, okay? So, type of development, let's do a comparison, or not yet, a single-family home, 454, brings in tax revenue, single-family home, if they had one student, the school cost alone is 18,682. So there's, to the, not to the good, to the bad, we're $7,500 to the bad. Okay. I think I need my next slide, I'm not sure. Okay.
Yes, great, yep.
Okay. So what would happen if instead we could put 6 dwellings on a lot instead of 1? All right, now remember, we're just looking at the income side of this now, not the cost of it. And let's assume that they're modest homes. Instead of being $450,000 or $500,000 homes, assume that they're $300,000 homes. Maybe a couple of them are $250,000 and a couple of them are $350,000, so we'll average them at $300,000. They're still going to bring in $1.8 million as an increase to the tax base. And the tax revenue is going to be $44,208 instead of $11,000. Okay? But remember again, this is just the income side. So what's the expense of adding 6 pocket neighborhoods here? 6 homes in a pocket neighborhood. All right? So here's a comparison. The figures on the top are going to look familiar. 454, the tax revenue is 11. Pocket neighborhood, tax revenue is 44. All right, now what happens to the cost? Single family, here's that figure we saw again, assuming 1 student, there's a deficit of $7,500. In a pocket neighborhood, all right, you said 1.5 students, school cost is higher, but when you compare the school cost with the income, now you're $16,000 ahead. The 1.5 figure, just like the 1 figure, comes from the New Hampshire statistics and also the Lyme statistics. And if you want to get into it, we can give you lots more statistics. But we're trying to compare apples to apples here, so that a pocket neighborhood would bring in enough money, more than enough money, and we would no longer have an unsustainable format. Okay. Let's see, let's go back to, really? Okay,
yeah, right.
There we go. So what does that have to do with taxes? The single-family homes that we are encouraging now are creating a deficit every time people move in. We love kids. This is not an anti-kid ordinance. But I think that if each new home didn't create a deficit, more of us would be able to welcome with enthusiasm, the enthusiasm we feel for the new kids who are coming into town, the new families, instead of having that fear like, oh my God, I sold my house to somebody with 3 kids, and what's that going to do to my property taxes? Okay? So that's the finances. What would it look like? Here's a slide that shows an undeveloped parcel of land. A little hard to see, but basically we're looking at trees. You've got a road in the middle, and then you've got some land on the other side. Make sense? There's nothing on it, okay? It's an undeveloped parcel. Now, right now, if you could put 1 home on it, which is what we tend to do, this is what it might look like. I wish I had a laser pointer, but use your imagination. Okay, so there's a driveway coming in. You can see, I don't know if we can make it any bigger, there's a couple of some garages, there's a house, there's a barn. It looks pretty much like the sort of development we see on parcels here in Lyme now, okay? This is allowed, fine. What if instead, on this same parcel, you could have 6 dwellings? Okay? Again, you've got a driveway in, but these are 6 clustered pocket neighborhoods, and you've got, looks like a duplex, little barn space, looking just like our carriage sheds, and also some common space, because that's built in. So it looks, it has about the same amount of disruption for 6 homes instead of, in comparison to the 1. So we're not showing what we would build, but this is what anybody could build on here. All right, how many, no, next slide. How many homes, if you had a large parcel, how many homes could be built? And what might they look like? Okay? Suppose you had a 100-acre parcel. Looks suspiciously like the smaller one, but we just, now imagine that it's a 100-acre, generic 100-acre parcel. And what we're looking at here, can you make it any bigger, or is this just as hard as we can do?
I'm not sure I can make it any bigger.
Okay.
No.
What if, is there one more light to turn out, or is that gonna put us in the pitch darkness? Pitch darkness, can you stand it?
fine.
Okay, let's keep it, all right, that helps, I think. All right, so what we're looking here is the, and John's head.
Oh, sorry.
No, you're not in the way, it's just, so this is that same parcel. Now we see a 100-acre parcel, and we see 4 homes. Now, how do you get 4 homes on a 100-acre parcel? These guys are expert at that, but it would not be surprising to come up with 4 lots that you could build on if you had a 100-acre parcel on this property north of town. Okay, now I'm gonna have to show me the next picture and see if I know what I want. All right, and this is just a blow up of that same thing. You know, so you've got your houses and your barns and your garages and, you know, workshop space, woodshed, whatever you got. Okay, next. What if you put 24? Remember, we had 4 here, we're gonna allow 6. So this is 24 dwellings on that same 100-acre parcel. And I don't know that we don't have a blow up of that, I don't think.
We do, it's a little out of order, but we could,
Well, all right, so later if you want to see what it looks like, but you can see how this fits on there. This is 24 dwellings, garages, and some of the benefits of this you can see. There's less disruption. The open space is more protected. It also has some of the benefits of living in community in terms of living closer to other people. Like, obviously, we're not saying everybody has to live in community, but if you want to build this way, it's closer. All right, what's my next picture going to show? Okay, oh, there we go. So, compare this in your mind with the 4, dare I say, McMansions that we had, that we showed before on the previous slide. So it's clustered.
I'll jump back just for, so
There we go.
there's
So
the
there's
same
that.
parcel with the 4 homes,
Okay,
and I'll switch back.
there we go.
Okay.
Okay, next. What do we got? All right. Yes, it's very pretty, but the dollars are really important. So here's what the dollars look like. We saw before the single-family home with the 454, but now multiply that by 4, because you've got a larger parcel. So it's gonna add, whoa, this is terrific, $1.8 million to the tax base and $44,000 in annual tax revenue. In comparison, that pocket neighborhood is gonna add, even though the houses are less expensive overall, there's 24 of them, so it's gonna add $7.2 million to the tax base. And the tax revenue is gonna be $176,000. Now, below, look at that's the income. Now let's look at the expense side again. Single family, assuming there's now 4 of these homes, assume 4 students. All right, school cost $74,000, deficit $30,000. Pocket neighborhood, more tax revenue, a few more students, 6 to 8, but the bottom line is, instead of running a deficit, you're running a surplus, and perhaps a significant surplus. That's the difference. Now, I want to remind you, we said in the pocket neighborhood, you could say if taxes were the only issue, well, why don't we just allow 6 houses on every lot in town? But that's not a direction I think a lot of people in town would go. So this proposal is a limited proposal to have it on a small part, on a state highway, as an experiment to see what happens. And it also, it's not just any 6 houses, it's 3 deliberately small houses with common space to make it possible for other people to build smaller houses. Okay, what's gonna come up next? Our summary, haha, all right. Lyme needs a sustainable financial path for the future. If we keep building this way, we're gonna keep having tax problems. If single-family homes are the only allowed form of development, our tax revenues are gonna continue to fall short. Pocket neighborhoods are gonna help us meet the goals of the master plan that, that you guys wrote. The parts of it especially that say minimize tax increases and allow diversity of housing. And they can be part of the larger solution through a bigger tax base with smaller homes and smaller school expenses. And that's what we hope each and every one of you will say, we think this is a great idea and we're gonna support it. Okay? Would you be so good as to turn the light back on? Hello.
Liz, how does this differ from?
Can we just,
Oh, I'm sorry.
we're gonna get to you all in a moment, but we wanted to have the, and when we do, I'll be calling on each person individually. But I wanted to give everybody on the board first a chance to ask questions or comments, make comments. So board, go ahead.
And if you want to like look at the slides or the figures or any of that, I mean, I bet that's information that's familiar to you, but, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Well, one of the problems I have is I still think this really fits the definition of spot zone.
Well-
According to what I've looked at and what I've seen, I think it really is spot zone.
And what, and specifically why? I mean, I looked at some of the handouts that David gave.
Well, a definition of spot zoning is the the application of zoning to a specific parcel or parcels of land within a larger zoned area. And when the rezoning is usually at odds with the city's master plan and current zoning restrictions.
So I think,
and
so
then-
you asked us that before, and I think that's great, and we've gone
Right.
back to council, and they've said a couple things. They've said, that, your master plan, has many goals, and some of them, this fits perfectly. And so it would not, it's not a no-brainer that this is at odds with the town's master plan. And then the second thing is, it's not just this parcel, it's all the parcels in a 1 mile stretch. And the planning board could make it bigger if they chose to, or if it worked for a year, you could say, we'd like to make it bigger.
Well, I think one of the problems is half of the land that's that would be affected is owned by you guys.
No, it's,
Because there's 4 parcels and you own 2 of them, right?
no, we
No, we
own
own one.
one.
Well, let's clarify what you,
Sure.
what you own. You, and I think this is really pertinent to the potential. There's what you own, and people should really keep in mind what you own multiplied by, and we're going by your figures, not our,
Yeah.
but we'll go with your figures. Plus another 3, right? What you own, you're saying that there are 4.
There's 4 and we own one.
Yeah, and you're saying merger is unlikely because of costs, but there is the potential for mergers of other properties, if they think that this is a profitable situation. So the 4 is not absolutely definite, there's the potential for more.
I mean, we can show you the tax maps, but,
I've
if
seen,
you
no,
want,
I've
you
seen,
know, and
I'm
there's-
just
yeah.
trying to lay
There
out for
aren't-
people who are
right.
not familiar with this,
Yeah.
that when you say that there are 4 properties, there's the potential for merger to create more, because this is a, you know, a pretty potentially good situation. And we should really clarify what you own, because, you know, not coincidentally, the line ends pretty much past your property.
oh,
No?
That's not so, no, it's a couple hundred yards north of Pinnacle Hill Road.
we thought
North
that,
of Pinnacle Hill
Yes.
Road.
yeah, we thought going to the
Okay,
town
but
playing
your
fields
property-
made sense.
Is included.
My personal,
Your
Rich
personal
Brown's and
property.
Lynn Brown's property,
So,
yes.
so there is the,
But your property.
so, well, hold on. So there is the we'll call the Pinnacle Project property, that we've been talking about all these years.
And then there's a bulge
And then
property.
well, no, hold on.
Oh.
Then there's Lyme Lodge.
No,
Lock
that's
Line
the same property.
Well, no, it's been subdivided.
Yes, he's correct,
Oh, all right.
yes.
So there is the remainder lot,
Mhm, yes.
there's the, Lyme Lodge, there's your property,
Mhm.
your personal property, and then you have, what, 15, 16 acres north
That's
of
right,
there.
yeah.
So whether you did it or not, or whether you have any intention to do that,
Mhm.
what is the cumulative number of those acres? It's like, how much is the remainder lot? Like 100 or something?
So it's the remainder lot is about 95.
95, and how many acres on Lyme Lodge?
There's, call it 12.
12, and then
And then
you have an
we're
acre
about
or so,
16.
and then another 15.
Right.
So you or a future owner
Mhm.
of those properties could merge them
Yes.
and use all of that to create a spectacular development and scale and density. Even, so I mean, I'm not even talking about what you're potentially doing on your remainder lot.
Mhm.
So there's the potential for this enormous development on all that cumulative land there. Whether you're interested or not, you could turn around, you could pass this thing, decide you don't wanna undertake it, or you have a change of plans, somebody else comes in, they have the right to merge all of that and.
Rich, I think it might be worth showing a picture. I think if you took every parcel of land that either you owned or Lockline Lodge owned,
Right.
you might get another lot. You're
Right.
not gonna get 10 lots.
Well,
That's right.
but then you have grandfathered rights on Lockline Lodge, and you
On what you
have a
have.
lodging concern there, which could then extend to the whole area. I'm just pointing out that you're putting, what you
You're
are.
making factually incorrect statements, I
Okay,
think,
tell me
John, and I
tell
just-
me what are incorrect.
So, I think, John, it is certainly true that the interested parties of the Lockline Lodge and the Brown family could merge that.
Yeah.
You are as familiar as we with the conservation overlays
Absolutely.
in the Lockline Lodge property. I will assure you, they're not a whole lot better on the Brown family property that's next to it. So I think we see the remainder lot having the 95 acres. We believe there's four lots there. So
Okay.
that's why we had the 4 lots.
Let me,
So
let
I
me
don't-
ju-
I don't see
let me
that-
just put it this way.
Yes?
I think people should consider that all those contiguous properties under similar ownership,
Mhm.
either direct or beneficial ownership, have greater potential. I'll just leave it at that. The other thing I think is really important for people to realize is this is not just about what you would do. Okay?
Right.
We agree.
We have at least, and I'll go as conservatively as possible, 3 other properties, potentially more.
Mhm.
The way you've written this is really, I mean, I know you tried your best on this, but it's really confusing from a planning point of view. There's so many unintended consequences, like, you could get these hybrid developments where you have clinics, institutional, government, lodging, daycare, things like that, combined with other things. I don't really have any idea of how that's gonna work. I think people should realize that what you're being presented with is sounds really good, if that's what you want. But if you read this closely, from a planning point of view, there are references to the charts, and my having looked at it, I find it really confusing, and I find the potential unintended consequences unpredictable. Before I give other people more of a chance, I went to the site visit for your last proposal.
Mhm.
And the scale and density was just shocking, to me anyway, and to almost everybody who wasn't associated with the project. What you have devised in this, what you're calling a pocket neighborhood amendment, allows for attached and semi-detached housing, which means that you're gonna be able to get these things together, and you can say, well, we're not gonna do that, or whatever, but somebody can build just enormous, enormous buildings with remarkable density. The other thing I'd like to point out is that the one bedroom, the assumptions about, well, not one bedroom, but 1,100 square feet, I think it's half of them, or.
Yeah, half would have to.
Half of them. There's no upper limit on the remaining units size in terms of bedrooms. And, you know, when I came of age in my early 20s during the Hoover administration, almost everybody I knew with like 1,100 square feet was an incredible amount of space. It wasn't like, 1,100 square feet, how are we gonna fit in there? It's not an easy assumption to just say, oh, only such and such a demographic are gonna move in there. So I've had my say, so please.
So I wanted to understand a little bit better about some of the numbers that you presented. When you say a property is gonna cost $300,000, does that include the development costs, the driveway and the septic and the wells, and the common space that is gonna have to be built to go along with each unit?
If I understand your question correctly,
Mhm.
we project that we can sell our homes from about $299 up. Sell them, that means covering all of those expenses, the septic, the water, et cetera.
Okay, and then.
And that's what we've worked up with Michael Bruss and the engineers and.
Okay, and then the taxes that'll be generated from that, how does the common area, the common amenities, the extra buildings and all that, how does that play out in terms of tax revenues? Is that included in your calculations?
We've assumed that, like any condominium, the appraisals would be based, each home is appraised at like 300,000, and that includes their share of the common space.
So that's included in it?
That would be included. Now, in fact, it might be appraised a little higher, which would bring even more money into
Well,
the
I'm
tax
just trying to
basis, but yeah.
understand your numbers and
Yeah.
what you're trying to.
Right.
Okay. And so when you get to talking between 4 families and 24 families, it seems fair to count in some other town service costs, because I think 24 families are going to demand more services than 4, and that you can't just present the children. You need to talk about other services that are provided to families in this community. And that goes, you know, from transfer to fire to, you know, those others. So it's, I don't think a realistic, straight-faced assessment
Well, I
of
think
what
most of the town
differences
budget
are.
is roads and maintenance, but I think that that's a good question, and we can
Well, I
go
think
back and say
If you're
how
trying-
much of that, and I think that's a good
If
question
you're
to
trying
address.
to do a fair assessment, because you seem to be putting a lot of emphasis on that, on the finances here. So, it also is a little confusing to me how you chose the new homes being built at 454, because those are bigger houses than I think what you're proposing to be built.
That's what Lyme is built.
Well, that's
the
not
district.
Lyme, it's what people who are moving to town are choosing to build, right?
I
The
don't-
town
what's
is
the
not
difference?
building those.
We shouldn't be comparing
Well,
your development to a proposed new house. We're not choosing between those two options,
so-
we're choosing between this amendment and no amendment.
So, I think,
Okay, well,
let.
no, but this is the basis of this financial thing, because this is
Yeah, I
what they're
think that's
trying
a
to sell
fair-
it on. I mean,
yeah.
the form of development, there's nothing wrong with that, but in that, the emphasis right now is that this is gonna be tax beneficial to our community. I wanna be sure that we really understand what's being presented. And, so I'm trying to
Right.
get at why wouldn't you wanna look at just like a normal 1,100 square foot house and what that is generating rather than, something that's bigger?
That's a great question, and the answer is, and we didn't know this when we started working with the town, but what happens is because the conservation overlays work the way they do, most lots are big. And who in their, most people are not gonna buy a big lot and then build a 1,000 or 1,100 square foot house on it. They don't do it, and in fact, they're not doing it in Lyme.
But that gets
Okay.
back to my point, we're
Okay,
not
can I
comparing your,
just finish mine?
Yeah.
Okay, so one thing about Lyme is that if you can lot average, and you don't have to have a big lot. You can create a small lot that's average, so that that's a small lot as long as the average density, is the same. So that doesn't necessarily have to be the case. And we haven't really seen that many subdivisions anyway, so we're not, it's like people kind of don't wanna subdivide their land, it's more what I'm getting, that's a choice that people are making. So one problem I had with how your amendment is written, happens at 13.4C. Because when I read this, it says access and road frontage, it says pocket neighborhoods shall be located on Route 10, no more than 1 mile north of the northern boundary of the Lyme Common District as established on the date of the adoption of the article. But it doesn't establish a southern boundary, so as I read this, it goes all the way from the Hanover line to 1 mile north of the common. And,
Wait,
okay,
it shall be located.
located on Route 10,
Yes.
no more than 1 mile north of the northern boundary of the Lyme Common District. But it doesn't tell me where that starts.
Well, doesn't 1 mile north of the northern,
No,
Boundary.
we'll read it, Rich.
well, I have.
Well, when I read this, for me, I was shocked to see the picture that you put about where this applied, because when I read it, I'm going, oh my, it's gonna be located on Route 10, and then no more than 1 mile north of the northern boundary of the Lyme Common District. And I'm thinking, well, they don't say it's gotta be north of the Lyme District, it just says it's gotta be on Route 10. So that means that actually it looks like it stretches all the way down Route 10.
So what you're saying is, this is creating a northern limit, but
It doesn't have
there's
southern
not
limit.
a specified southern
No.
limit.
Well,
The
but-
the specified southern limit is the boundary of.
But it doesn't say
Lyme
that.
Town.
Doesn't say that.
Say that, I mean, that's.
Well,
what
I
it
guess I
shows.
would say this is subject to interpretation, and perhaps it could even have been better drafted, but of course, you guys looked at it before. and-
We don't write your,
I'm sorry,
we don't
but-
write your pocket neighborhood.
Yeah,
I
And this
know
was
you
actually
don't.
brought up at a
It
meeting.
was,
And this
right?
was brought up and you
We
changed
We
it.
made the
in response to
corrections
that.
that you guys
You did, you
suggested.
changed it, but you changed it to this.
Well, we
So,
think- all right.
I still think that it says what we all
Well,
expected.
it doesn't say that, and so, I mean, I know what your intent is, because I saw that there, but it didn't conform to comport with what I had read. And the other, just one other thing, I think in your presentation, that it would be interesting to actually say how much building or lot coverage every family's going to be responsible for, because as drafted, it's at least 1,300 square feet, because it's your 1,100 plus every
Mhm,
unit's supposed to have 200
Right.
more. And in fact, do you have a sense about, like, really how much gross area that, would generate for, like, the types of amenities that you're,
Well, we know it's
You think you're
under
new?
what, I mean, it depends what people, this is not just us.
no, I realize that,
But,
but I'm wondering what is
it
a
would be
logical,
Much under what the town allows now. So we just tried to calculate a bunch of different possibilities. If the church wanted to build something for senior citizens, and they wanted to do it as a pocket neighborhood, and we can't project what they would
Okay.
do.
so,
But it's certainly way under what is allowed, under the existing lot coverage, square foot, gross floor area,
okay,
et
well, can I
cetera.
put another way then, how much would you expect your 24 units to generate in terms of those common built amenities? How much lot coverage? Is it 24, is it?
Well, if it were 200 for
right.
24.
Right,
it's
so,
very-
I mean,
so-
right, so,
But is that what you expect, that you're,
Um,
like in your planning, is that what you're thinking? Or is that, I
We
mean, where
might
did you
well-
get that number?
right, where'd the 200 come from?
Yeah, and does that work for you?
200, I think, is enough. I mean, one of the concerns that I think the board expressed was that, well, just any developer could come in and do this, and I think the inclusion of the common area is a characteristic that's attractive to the kinds of communities that we're thinking about. I think it's attractive for a lot of reasons.
I would just
But-
add that the common area could be a big garage.
Okay, so that
Yeah,
was my
so,
point, is that
right.
a small garage is 200 square feet,
Mhm,
and so
mhm.
if everybody gets a small garage,
Well,
that's
that-
already, and then you have
Mhm.
more stuff, so I wondered, you know,
So, that's
how
a
much
good
more
point.
stuff?
What's the most effective way to respond to it? Because, John, you said a couple of things that I did want to respond to. Vicki, you said a couple of things. And how's
Go
it?
ahead.
Maybe other people have questions.
Okay.
No, no,
I
go
just-
ahead and respond.
Those are just questions I have.
Yeah.
Go ahead and respond.
That's good. So, Vicki, your question about the town services, could well cost more for 24 families than 4. I mean, obviously, it's 6 times the number of families, so it would, but perhaps there's a factor that it would grow
Yeah, just,
larger.
you guys, I don't expect you to
And-
pull that number out of your
Right,
hat, but just
and
in
so-
terms
but
of
let me-
fairness, I
Right,
think
let
you
me,
should.
let me address that,
should address it
and
in
to
your
say
slides.
that, I think it's important to consider the pocket neighborhood in relation to the kind of development that's going on now. And I don't know, actually, I should ask the board, do you disagree with our calculations about the single-family home, the median home, not generating enough tax revenue?
No,
So
but
I'm-
again, I wanna get back, I think that's the wrong comparison, because we're not deciding between this development and another home like that. We're deciding between this article and not this article.
Right, and if not this article,
No,
we're
So
gonna
we should be
continue.
comparing it to
I
a
think
otherwise
that's,
new house.
I-
Because otherwise new house is still allowed, even if we adopt this
Absolutely,
amendment.
right.
That's a,
And,
that's a separate question, the other, the
So-
4-bedroom home.
so, it sounds, let me, look, I'm casting about for a nice way to say this. I think that continuing on with the ordinance as is, not allowing other forms of development that are admittedly more dense, but that have a chance of increasing the tax base.
I would just say that, and I'll put it as generally and as quickly as possible. I disagree with your assumptions. I think that it's likely that it's gonna be a negative in terms of tax base. I don't remotely agree.
Because?
Because I think your figures are incorrect. I think your assumptions about the type of, the demographic that might find these places attractive is simply wrong. And, you know, and to put also simply, you know, we've known each other a long time. We've been doing this for a lot of years. We've had the open space neighborhoods, the conservation neighborhoods, the co-housing neighborhoods, and now we have the pocket neighborhoods. All of this is generated, in my opinion, from what works on your property for what you wanna do. And I have not, you know, more power to you. I think it's a really potentially nice thing until I actually saw the details. But I just think that your assumptions are, I know I disagree with your revenue assumptions and the net benefit to the town.
I think
Totally
you're
disagree.
comparing one single house to 24 that you have, you're saying out of the 24, you're going to have X number of students, whereas a single house you have X number, and that you should be comparing 24 residences in Lyme compared to your 24 and showing the difference between the two, not just a single residence that, you know, it seems you're comparing apples to oranges.
Well, okay,
That's-
so
That's
if,
what I'm saying.
Say,
So
so
let's-
so if we took 24 of the most recent 24 homes that were built, they've created a deficit of, and we could,
But we're not right now, we're not addressing
They don't all.
whether or not
include-
that's a problem in the ordinance or not is a separate
They
discussion.
have
And we're not
3.7
talking about that right now.
bedrooms.
All right.
We're talking about
That's the
your
data.
zoning amendment, right? We're not
So-
talking about what other
So
new
you're
homes
saying our
other people
data
can
is
build.
wrong.
So, yeah, so I hear that point. And certainly our primary mission tonight is to ask for the zoning board approval.
This is the planning
And
board.
that's, thank you, Vicky, for, planning board approval. And if not, we certainly want to understand your reasons. Obviously, there is the public hearing.
Yeah,
that we're
so
speaking to that.
let's end this,
So-
this part, we can come back and have more fascinating discussions later. After Vicky,
Can I just say one thing?
we'll get to the public.
One thing, this is a land use proposal, it's not a tax-based proposal, and I think we have an obligation to look at it as a land use proposal and what land use it does,
Well-
and to also move, they brought this up as a tax benefit thing, but it's really land use.
I
and
think it's
wanna be grounded in
fair,
that
I think it's fair
conversation.
relating to land use, you know.
It's
to-
fair, but we
to-
haven't really talked about it as a land use proposal.
Well, that's,
so-
we can talk about it as a
So we need to get back to
land
that.
use. We can
Okay.
get back to it, I think their numbers are way off. But let's give the public a chance to speak. So I'm in charge here, which is your problem. But I'm gonna give everybody a chance to talk, and once I feel like, you know, we get your point, we'll move on. So I'm gonna try to be polite, but not too polite. So, who wants to go first? You're pointing, all right, Ray.
Well, I just had a question for Liz and Rich. How does this proposal differ from the cluster housing provisions that we already have? And, you know, the tax issue aside, but just looking at the land use. Don't we have provisions for doing the kind of denser development that you're talking about?
Not really.
And explain that.
Okay, Vicky did mention that we have a lot size averaging ordinance. And it is true that it allows you to have homes on smaller parcels, on smaller lots. That's the lot size averaging. But you need to take a large parcel and you come to the planning board and you say, I believe I can get 2 or 7 lots out of this. But I don't want to chop up this large parcel with 2 or 7 homes strewn across it. I just want to have 2 or 7 homes clustered together, averaging the lot size on a portion of it. But you still have the same density, have the same number of single-family homes on a lot. We are specifically asking in this case to say, you have a lot, our example, you know, which happens to match the property at the lot line. You have a lot, we could get 4 parcels out, 4 lots from it, and we've met with the planning board and they pretty much nodded their head.
We have not made any official determination.
That, I will grant that.
But your assumption was 4.
Right, and we've got the engineering studies and all.
Could be more, could be less.
And, so we could get 4 homes on that, pretty likely. We've done all the engineering studies. But,
That's taking out the overlays.
all conservation overlays and dimensional controls and all. And so we could still only get 4 homes on that 95-acre parcel. What we are specifically asking in the pocket neighborhood is intentionally to allow more people to develop, to share the cost of the property, to live there, to be close together, to be more neighborly. I think one of the things Liz didn't say is that having people close together, especially as we age, especially as we get on, you avoid the isolation of living by
But I
yourself
think
in a big
we
home.
can cluster,
Right,
but you gotta have a lot of property,
yeah,
and
so,
it's expensive.
so to answer.
We
to
did, we
answer-
went through the lot size averaging exercise,
Right.
and the problem you had with it was that you couldn't mass the buildings together. We could give you the buildings, you know, the next to each other, but you wanted a specific type of building.
Well, John, I think you're missing the point that maybe Ray is asking, which is why not just use lot size averaging? And the lot size averaging doesn't buy you more homes.
I don't think that's missing the point. I think the point is that you can use lot size averaging, but that it didn't suit your particular desire.
We're not talking about today, we're not talking about any of our past efforts.
Yes, we are. We're talking about lot size averaging, and we went through an
So
extensive.
the answer is you could cluster, but you'd only end up with 4 houses clustered together.
Right,
Right, right. And
That's the
so-
answer.
Okay.
And that's not what you want to do.
Well,
Right.
and that doesn't serve the purpose of lowering the cost of building. Because you still
Well, that's
have
it.
an expensive
That's a
piece
good
of
point,
land with 4 homes on it, whether they're close together or spread out.
all right.
Thank you.
Kevin, yeah.
Yeah, thank you. So Liz, I like what you've done in that, as an engineer that runs around with a
Well,
calculator in his pocket.
what?
I need to stand just to
Okay.
pass out my stuff, John, so
Okay.
give me a chance. So
You get
I
stuff.
thought that what you did here answered a lot of my questions, and so it really informed me. As I take off and look at it though, and what you said today, with Lyme, graying, we do have less kids, and so the number of students or children per person, per household, I think, is skewed. Using New Hampshire's numbers, I think, is way skewed. We
Mhm.
just happen to be in a community that has an excellent elementary school and very good high school choice. And so that draw to any development is strong. And so I kind of looked at your numbers, it's the engineer in me, and I prepared something a little bit different. And then I took, and I'll just hold it up to start with, but the very top row basically, and I brought like 10 or 12 copies, so if you just share like one with 2 people. If you take your same data that you used for the pocket neighborhoods and apply it, which is the very top line, which is what I've done with your students, the 6 to 8 student number, I get your numbers, that adds up. And so, through the phraseology of what you put on the website, it talks about, generating revenue for the town, and I agree with you. We're in a very large bind with respect to the base of our taxable properties in Lyme not growing. If you could just pass these back, please. But as I see it, and when I actually was in the principal's office yesterday, not because I was bad, but talking with him. And he informed me, that we've actually had a 30% increase in students in the last 5 years. And so my point really is that the numbers that you use to generate your 6 to 8 students, in my view, is way, way short. In fact, this slide, what it does is it talks about, I think you could end up with, and I like the idea when you talk about aging in place and having people close together, and I think there's some value to that. And so I assumed for the 24 homes that half of them would be seniors. I made that assumption. So 0 children.
Yeah.
And then I assumed, because you say 1,100 square foot, but then you don't say how big the other ones could get. And sort of like John, although my situation's a little different, family of 7 grew up in 1,900 square feet, so it's doable. And that wasn't in New York City, that was in a, industrial town in western New York. And so with that, I think the opportunity for a somewhat larger home with 2 or 3 bedrooms could get more small families, young families, more children. And what I'm trying to show here is just, and it's not really how bad it could get, but it starts to go in that direction, is that if we end up with 24 students for one pocket neighborhood.
So that you're really averaging one per unit.
1 per unit.
However you break it down.
However you break it down, it's 1 per unit.
Or 2 for some
Or
and
2
0
for, or 2 for
yeah.
half of them.
Right?
I got 1 spare copy. Who's the lucky winner?
We're good here.
Okay. So, so if we end up with that number for just one of the pocket neighborhoods, we actually come out to the negative $271,000 per year just for education. Now the way
No, wait, you've got 24 students.
yeah, because that's, so if we've got 1 per unit, you got 24 in each one of your pockets. Or you got 0 and 12 and 2 and the other 12, that's 24.
Right, I see what you're saying. Mm-hmm.
And so then all I've done is say, okay, well, for pocket neighborhoods number 2, 3, and 4, which this warrant article allows for if they happen, now we could end up with a total of 4 pocket neighborhoods, 96 students into a school that currently, and we could count the K-8 plus the high school, and get closely to about 100 to 280 total students. But now we're gonna add another 100? The bottom line is that if that happens, and I actually believe it could happen, the town is gonna be in a deficit for almost $1.1 million per year, which is a 15% increase in your tax bill starting tomorrow, as soon as these are built. And so I actually take exception to the way the webpage paints it, because I think the reality is much closer to this. It's my opinion. Your data used in New Hampshire data, I think Lyme is exceptional, and that data doesn't fit.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else?
I guess I wanna, we did say, what if there were more kids?
Sure.
And I
You
think.
did say it was a
the-
variable on the
Right.
webpage.
And we also assumed here only one child for each of the new homes that have been built in the last 3 years. And of course, we know that there's not just one child for all the new homes that have been built in the last 3 years. So I think that this perhaps, we would do better, we can come up with more, I'd love to talk to you and put some more figures in here. Look how many kids are actually in the schools, because I think 1 is a low estimate for the single-family homes. I guess that's all I would say right now.
So you think it would be, he's underestimating the number of kids?
No,
No.
I didn't look at the single-family homes.
Yeah.
Right, I mean, in fact, other numbers that we didn't put on the slide, just to keep it simple. The 2010 census shows that 73% of the homes in Lyme have no children, no people under 18 years old. So 27% of the homes do have.
Right, well, I mean,
Students.
I don't know, I don't know those
So,
figures, but.
well, let me tell you where
Yeah.
this goes. In fact, it says about 200 homes have children, and of the 300 kids in the Lyme school, so there's about 1.5 children per
Per
per home,
Right.
and per home that has children. And so the question is, where do we come down? If we have smaller units, I still think the smaller units are the 1,100 and smaller are not gonna draw children. The others may, and so,
I mean, I
So-
think
So this
Kevin's
is
Kevin's
a good
use
point, and we
of
could look at
1
it.
is very fair. 1 per unit is very fair.
okay,
Um,
good.
um,
Thank you, Kevin.
All right, any other comments? Yes, please.
My name is Meg Sheehan, I'm on the Conservation Commission. This is all new to me and I'm just trying to understand it, but I was just wondering if there's like a build-out analysis that would show if all the potentially rezoned parcels were completely built out. Maybe that's what that chart is showing, but then also, where it says only 50% of the units have to be 1,100 square feet. So what is the max for the remaining units, and
There is no max for the remaining.
so they
That's
can be
right.
as big as the zoning allows?
Right.
There's no, and it also says that it's at least 200 square feet for each unit. How big can the accessory uses be? Is there a max on that?
So,
And-
I'm sorry, go ahead.
And then, the other question would be, say if we're opening the door to this in one part of town, could other parts of town also be
Yes, good.
rezoned in the future?
Mhm. So, I think, let me speak to those things. This ordinance was drawn very carefully to allow no more development than a single-family home on a similarly sized lot would be. What we showed was the large home, which on a parcel that had 6.5 acre lot size, could have a 5,400 square foot footprint. So it could be a 10,000 square foot home. and a 2,000 square foot barn, and this and that. And so, the example that we showed for those single-family homes with all the outbuildings was about 11,000 square feet. And that's about half of what's allowed on that parcel. So, I'm getting into details, I'm sorry, but you asked kind of a detailed question. The pocket neighborhood could put 6 times as many families in there in fact, at a much smaller footprint, much smaller impact on the land. They could, just as a single family could build an enormous, I don't know, indoor tennis court or whatever, the pocket neighborhood community could choose to do that too. But that would be totally within the footprint and lot coverage the ordinance currently allows.
Does that answer?
I'm still confused,
Yeah.
but that's okay, but, another point is that, you mentioned that the dimensional controls of the ordinance,
Mhm.
whatever the existing, but then in F, you have exceptions to the dimensional controls, so I'm just, again, trying to figure this all out, that
So-
doesn't seem to make sense.
So, to go back to my first point, the pocket neighborhood development could be no larger than what would be allowed in a single-family home. So that was the intent of that part of the,
No more disruption of the land, no bigger buildings. That's the same.
to,
You mean percentage of lot coverage,
exactly,
basically?
yes.
And square feet also. If you could build a 5,000 square foot home as a single-family home, you could only build a 5,000 square foot building as a pocket neighborhood.
But then you
Now-
also have accessory
Oh,
uses
hold
that
on.
could
Yes,
be.
right.
Yeah, did you wanna say?
One thing to also remember is that you are also taking, if you have a large lot, you look at how many times you could subdivide, and then you use the numbers for that number of times you can subdivide. So you are taking and concentrating, not just, well, 6 houses, you could be concentrating everything for the entire lot as it would be if you subdivided it. So if you subdivided it and you put buildings, throughout the lot,
Mhm.
now you're saying, okay, we're gonna take everything that could be done in this lot, and now we're gonna concentrate it in this one area.
And
And that
leave the
would-
rest in open space.
So the scale, the difference is, the scale would be much different.
And because the way it looks, it says, you have a limit of 7,000 square feet for a building, but you have buildings that could be attached, semi-attached, which I'm not quite sure what semi-attached means. But if you attach them, you're now having buildings, if you attach 2 7,000 square foot buildings together, you now have a 14,000 square foot. Add another 7,000 and it's 21,000 square feet. And you're now having buildings that are much greater scale than what is allowed throughout the rest of the town.
For instance, if 6 lots, 6 times 7,000, you get a 42,000 square feet maximum building footprint. That's an acre. And you put together maximum gross floor area, you have the equivalent of 2 acres, 84,000 square feet. And maximum lot coverage, 6 times 26,000, 4 acres. I mean, this is what they're saying is true, that on individual lots, this is permitted. But I think it's helpful to understand in terms of what potential there is, in terms of scale, the enormity.
There's another comment from
Oh, I'm sorry.
Well,
yeah.
you started to answer one of the questions that I had, which was, what is the greatest possible footprint, and then what's the greatest possible square footage that could be built under this proposal? So is the footprint 42,000, or is it?
Well, I'm doing it very simply. I'm saying the maximum, and David, correct me if I'm wrong, but 7,000 square foot is the maximum building footprint. Multiply that by 6. so that's 42,000.
Yeah,
And again, correct me if I'm wrong, but I got 14,000 for maximum gross floor area, 6 times that is
Well,
84
why are you multiplying by 6, John?
for the 6 units.
Like, well, no, the lot coverage and the gross floor area and the building
Oh,
footprint.
I'm sorry.
Yes.
No, I am misstating that. If you had 6 lots, that's per 6 lots.
You could today build 6 7,000 square foot buildings.
If the lot, I mean,
If you
If
had
the lot were
if you had those
sufficient
lots.
size, yeah.
does that include the accessory buildings?
In fact, accessory buildings, correct me if I'm wrong, but accessory buildings count toward lot coverage. And so you could have, if you had sufficient size, one 7,000 square foot footprint home, a 7,000 square foot barn, a 7,000 square foot volleyball court, whatever, and up to the total lot coverage, which is
12% of
12%.
26,000. I think the answer to Tom's question, but tell me if I'm wrong, is that what could be built under this proposal is not 1 inch different than what can be built under the current ordinance.
That's not true.
Because you can attach the
You can
buildings.
attach buildings, making the single buildings much larger, so your scale does get,
Just looking for the overall potential scale, and so far, John, what I'm hearing from you is it's
Well,
42,000 feet
I was
times
saying
2
if there were
stories is
6 lots,
84.
but so change the numbers, they're saying 4 lots, to use your numbers, you would have 28,000, maximum building footprint. You would have,
no, I still think the maximum is, it tops out at 7,000, so your individual buildings,
Times 4. It's
but
times 4
your,
instead of 6.
it's your lot
oh, I'm
coverage
sorry,
would be,
yeah, so 20, so what would the number be?
again, without calculating
So
doing the
28.
calculated lot size on the lots, that's hard, be
Hard to say,
12%,
okay.
it's very hard to,
All right, suffice it to say, you're gonna have a much bigger scale, but I think what you're saying is we would have to dig in a lot deeper to get the exact numbers.
you would have to, make it, to do a
Well,
build-out
And
analysis
the
to try to.
difference is, I wanna be clear, if you had 4 lots and if you decided to build 4 big buildings, and they were close to each other but not attached, and so the difference is whether they're close to each other or attached?
Well,
That's
You
my
know,
question, yeah.
going by what I saw when you were doing the 36 unit project,
Right.
was just really astounding to see on the
Well,
site.
but
Now you're s-
we're
now
not
you're
proposing
saying
that.
24, but we don't know that, we don't know
Well,
that for sure.
Wait, say that
Wait,
again?
It's the fact that you allow them to be attached. You can take whatever
All
7,000
right,
square feet is,
let's put it
stick them
simply,
together, and make
let's
one
put it
huge building.
simply, the difference, the primary difference is the scale, the single scale in different areas. Another thing I would just like to add is that we have a thing called, for accessory usage, retail usage. So that's one thing I'm very confused about in terms of this. Customary accessory retail uses associated with things, so, with things that are commonly done on various properties. So, and I'm not saying about your project, but we don't know the implications of, does that mean that somebody's gonna be able to build something and then have various types of retail operations associated?
Only in the same way that it's allowed now. We
Okay.
propose no change.
Okay. Yeah,
Sorry, I have 2 other questions, but I'm gonna assume that the answer to question 1 is a minimum of 7,000 times 4, right?
Under-
28,000,
Under the current ordinance or under this ordinance, both the same.
okay, times, let's say, 2 stories is 56,000.
Well, there's a 14,000 square foot limit that the town has
14,000 feet per,
per building,
Gross
actually.
floor area.
So we couldn't build anything bigger than 14,000 square feet. We might be able to put them together, but the town's
you-
limit of
well, that's
14,000 still
exactly where I
applies.
ended up.
Yeah.
Right.
You have 4 lots times 14 is 56,000.
And you can't do that, because the town limits it to 14,000.
Individual buildings are limited to 14,000
Yeah, so
square
you
foot.
could build 4 14,000 square foot buildings, right?
You could do that today.
You can do that today.
Yeah, but that's permitted under your amendment.
And the current
Yes.
ordinance.
Okay.
I mean, that's not.
The difference is that they can mass it.
Yes,
No, we
But-
can't. We're still limited to the town's 14,000.
That was,
square
I
foot.
thought, the whole thing with it, then why have the semi-attached and all of that?
Well, actually, the reason that is because when we thought about this earlier on, some of you may or may not know, but the town there's 2 ways you can build. But there's people who may want to talk, but there's 2 ways you can build now. Single-family homes, or you can convert an existing building. And if you convert it, you can have 6 units in it. You could do that right now. It doesn't seem to work very well, because nobody's done it in recent memory, but it is allowed. Some of those could be big, and so Vicky raised the point about, whoa, those would be pretty massive if you did that.
2 other questions?
So we thought, instead of just having those massive buildings, why not give the flexibility to break them up to more fit the scale of Lyme? So that's where that comes from.
Yeah,
2 other questions, I'll try to squeeze them in. I've always been troubled by the fact that Lockline Lodge under this would still be in existence with its 22 footprints, which presumably could be developed.
the issue of Lockline Lodge is frankly a really confusing one to me. I don't really know without doing a real deep study what all the potential is, but I am fairly sure that, and they've said it isn't their intention, but there's a lot of potential there.
Oh, yeah.
So you not only are having this type of scale and density on the remainder lot, but it's going next to a place where there is already really a lot of scale and density. And during the high season, there have been complaints about safety. There's major issues about traffic and, I mean, to me, I'm just speaking about my opinion. I think the massing that's just going on there potentially is really problematic, and that's not even addressing the 3 other places.
Yeah, I'm just asking if the zoning board is considering that. I mean, the planning board is.
Yeah. Well,
Because that's a lot of footprints.
it's, sure is.
It's another 22, 1,000 foot.
Are you suggesting that we could turn those into 24 private homes?
That's what I would do if I was a developer. I don't understand why you're so eager to keep it if it loses money every year. And the only thing I can come up with is it's an opportunity.
Well, aside from, I mean,
But-
let's not get into that, because
I'll try to
who
address
knows,
it.
and my reaction to your question is, you're having a lot of intensity, I mean, enormous intensity in that one area.
Absolutely. 3rd question and last one for now. How many taxpayers are there in Lyme?
One. No, I thought it was me. I don't know,
Is it over 1,000?
I don't think so.
Anybody know?
There's 750 homes in town, I know that.
Yeah,
But a lot of vacant lots too, I'm sure.
yeah, into that.
So basically,
Oh.
I'm really, I liked your response to the tax argument. I mean, Lyme is a very attractive place, to live if you have kids. And that's one of the reasons that, my property is worth so much. There's streets between Lyme between Hanover and Lebanon, where the price differential from the Lebanon side of the street to the Hanover side of the street is over $100,000 on a $300,000 or $400,000 house. That's what it's worth to have access to those schools. But,
Yeah, I just wanna
let me
move things
just-
along.
so the tax burden of not doing this and building the 4 homes, the $30,000 or whatever it is, if it's 1,000 taxpayers, it's $30.
All right, in the back, you wanted to say something?
I'm a little confused. Did I understand earlier that every new single-family home with 2 or 3 kids in it is a serious drain, a serious deficit in the tax burden?
No.
Anyone?
Depends the value.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, so, looking at the homes that have been built in the last 4 years, the median assessed value, the value you pay your taxes on, is that $454,000. That leads to the $11,000 tax bill that people get.
Right.
And the average per student cost in the Lyme school is 18,600. So,
That's what I was-
yes,
that's
so
what I
there,
was getting at.
right. There are some homes, obviously, that don't have kids in them, but we're hearing 2 things. We're hearing everybody is really excited to move to Lyme, so that most homes do have kids in them. And also that.
Those new homes.
Well, right.
Right, 27.
Right, that's right. The new homes are big, 3.7 bedrooms, so they're primed for students. And we know that from the census data and the school kids, there's about 1.5 students per home. So I think the conclusion you draw, Chris, is exactly right. And that Lyme not offering an alternative to single-family homes is gonna continue the school tax escalation. I went to the budget hearing last Wednesday, and Jeff Valance did a very convincing job of why the taxes are what they are. The actually pretty impressive job they're doing to keep the taxes low. And so, there's not a lot of ways out of that. So, that's all I'll say.
Well, the basic question that I would like to have answered, and I hear a lot of confusing information, is, a basic question is, would your proposal, things are bad in terms of what development does and how many kids it brings in, it doesn't pay for it. Is your proposal worse per unit than ordinary single-family home development? Or better?
And we think it's a lot better.
Well,
And Vicky's saying no, and so I don't know how you come to that.
well, I think it
Basic
depends,
information.
it's all in the eye of the beholder. I mean, we're presenting things to you tonight, and you're gonna have to make a decision. I think Kevin presented a very convincing point of view, and Pinnacle is presenting another, and you really have to make your own determination about which one makes more sense to you.
Yeah, I think it's important to remember, there's a range of possible outcomes of what could happen if we approve the zoning change. Right, it could be 3 kids in the development, it could be 15, we don't know, we have to think about what that set of possible outcomes is and be prepared for that. And not just look at the average or the expected, we have to look at a range.
And I'd add, a major concern for me, everything else aside, is just enforcing the language here. There's so many things like what Vicky pointed out.
Well, that's a real problem.
That's a real problem.
Because plain reading goes from.
Well, we're
10
supposed to go by plain reading.
Well, that's what it
And
doesn't say
and it
anything about,
it doesn't say.
that it doesn't include Route 10 South, it doesn't say if it includes the village, it just says Route 10.
And
So
And
You
there,
could assume it includes all of it.
there are other things that are, from an enforcement point of view, are a little confusing. You know, even the pathway to who do they go before? I'm not sure whether they go before us or they go through over to the zoning board. And-
Why is that confusing?
Because it doesn't say.
It says everything else applies, so I don't know why that would be.
But what does that mean?
It-
I mean, David, what would your point be?
Well, I look at things, you know, like your computed number of lots. Well, first of all, you refer to the depth ratio requirements set forth in table 5.1, 5.11, and B. Actually, they're referenced in 5.11C, so you completely lost that reference, or didn't include it. So if there is when you look at that, and then, you know, as determined by the planning board in its review in site plan review, if there is an issue between, you know, what you believe and the board believes are the correct number of lots, there's nothing in here that talks about how to go back and deal with that type of issue. It just,
Because the assumption is that the only change we're making, it's nothing to the approval process, nothing to site plan review. The only change we're making is allowing increased density and, with smaller homes, basically.
well, you seem to think that, it does not come off that way in reading this. There's, like I say, in looking at this, trying to figure out a clear path of an application.
I mean, you're gonna be going to David, and if he's confused about it,
You know, I'm not quite sure you would say, okay, I wanna go to, the planning board for site plan review for this project, because I have to have that before I can, get a zoning permit.
Which is normal, right?
It depends on, some people will come to me and ask, and I will say, no, I can't do this because of, or it may be a mutual agreement that it needs to go ahead of time.
Well, if we haven't changed anything else in the ordinance, I don't understand why you would see changes in the ordinance. I mean, and we did talk about this in December. I mean, I think
okay,
the
so
overarching question.
let me, well, I'm pointing out things that to me are confusing. Maybe they're
Right.
confusing to you. In I, you have at least 50% of the dwelling units in the pocket neighborhood shall be no larger than 1,100 square feet. And is that gross floor area, or is that footprint? It's not specified.
What did you intend?
Yeah, I mean, I'm asking your intention on this.
It's always interesting to me because different towns define those things differently as far as I can
Well,
tell.
no, but you put 200 square feet down in J for gross floor area, so what were you thinking for the other one?
We would be thinking gross floor area.
You were thinking gross floor area for that?
But it doesn't say that.
Well, and one of the interesting questions is how is the town gonna measure it for energy purposes? I know that some towns are now saying we're measuring interior walls, because it creates.
That's different.
Yeah,
That's
that's
a totally
different.
different. I'm just pointing out that from my
Okay.
point of view, and I guess to some degree from David's, when I read through this, there's, the language in it is at certain points confusing.
I mean, I guess what I would say is, I think everyone agrees that each new home in town adds to the tax burden. And at-
No.
No, everybody
No, you're not
doesn't.
gonna agree with that.
No.
Over the experience of the past 10 years in Lyme, is that the average cost of the new home, adds to the tax
Well,
burden.
we discussed at length, and one thing we've been talking about a lot is senior housing. And, you know, that we tried to encourage you to have at least some assured senior housing. And, you know, that I'm disappointed it's not in there.
So, John,
Yeah,
let me ask, how is senior housing any different, from single-family housing, except they're unlikely.
Except that they're seniors.
Well, except that they're unlikely to be children there. In a
Well,
house,
that's the point, isn't it?
yes, I mean, that's.
I
that's
think,
the-
I think it would at
Mhm.
least mitigate
So, but what I hear you saying is that.
and allow seniors specified housing.
Right, but it's also clear to me that it's not possible to build new senior housing in town at less than the kinds of costs we're seeing now. As Liz said.
I don't
I
know
don't,
that that's true.
I mean, so land is expensive.
Yeah, We're
You know,
gonna,
so
we're starting to go
going
around in
again.
circles.
So,
Are there any
yeah.
other questions? Could you state your name, but not David?
David Roby.
Yeah.
I have a recommendation and comments. The recommendation is that you recommend against this zoning article. At a minimum, for the reason that Vicki brought up. It's clear that you can have these pocket neighborhoods all up and down Route 10. It was a drafting error, not intentional, I realize, but that's the fact. And so it ought to be turned down on that basis. Comments are, I think Kevin's analysis is compelling. So that to sell this as a tax saver for the town just isn't right. Secondly, I think that there should be a build-out analysis when they come back next year, having identified northern part of Route 10 as the location for the
Well,
pocket
we
neighborhoods.
requested a building analysis several times.
But the other point is that I look at this through the eyes of a developer, and I think it's terrific. The density has increased enormously. I get 6 units per lot. In your case, I get 24 units. Now, you flip it to me as a developer, and I build a 12-unit apartment with 11,000 square foot, 1,100 square foot apartments. Oh, plus another 200 square feet per unit of accessory space. I can rent those all day long, probably to a small family with a child. And I still have 12 houses that can be McMansions. It doesn't do what you all want it to do. Well, it does what you want it to do, but it really does for the developer what he wants to do, which is to make a lot of money. Don't do it.
All right, are there any other comments? There's a comment.
Well, it is a comment, not a question. We've all been in these meetings before, and I think the Pinnacle group are all well-intentioned, nice people, and I think their proposal is terrific. It's sustainable, it's addressing seniors, it's addressing the tax issue. It's energy efficient, it's consolidating the density of buildings, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. The problem is, repeatedly, you're trying to drive a square peg into a round hole. There are a lot of towns around here where you can do the development that you want. You could go to Lyme, excuse me, you could go to Fairleigh, you could go to Orford, you could go to White River, Lebanon, and they probably welcome your proposal because it has a lot to recommend it. But I don't think it's appropriate development for Lyme, and I sincerely wish you'd accept that. You already have quite a bit of development on your property.
All right, and I would like to just, before we take a vote on it, also say that you're both really, I've been talking to you for years. It's one of the biggest difficulties is we all know you're well-intentioned. We all know you're good people with something you really want to do, and it's really been difficult to always have to be, on the other side of it. I really wish you well. I feel badly that we couldn't come to some sort of workable thing for you. And
That's a very nice thing to say. Do you think there's any future for any sort of development in Lyme other than single-family home?
Do I think so? Yeah, I think there's the potential for it, yeah, and I think there exists the potential for it also. All right, so I think, has everybody had quite enough? I'll take that as a yes. So let's take a vote on this. All those in favor of the pocket neighborhood zoning amendment, say aye. All those opposed? Aye. All right, so it's unanimous. Planning board opposes this 5-0. And sorry, I mean genuinely.
Thank everybody for coming.
Thank you all for coming.
Nobody's staying for the accessory dwelling unit?
Are you going back by the comments?